Hello, I'm Mercedes Stephenson, and this is the West Bloc Politics, Perspectives, and Players. Party leaders have spent the past few critical days of the campaign crisscrossing the country, making their final pitch to voters. But they've also been making threats, saying that if you vote for the competition, you could vote for government cuts. Joining me now to discuss the strategies as we head into the last 24-hour dash before people cast their votes, Richard Mahoney for the Liberals, Fred DeLorey for the Conservatives, and Anne McGrath for the NDP. Lots of misinformation on the campaign trail this week, from the Liberals claiming that the Tories are going to put guns in the streets to the Conservatives claiming that the Liberals are going to form a coalition with the NDP and raise the GST. There's no suggestion in any of the parties' platforms that these are situations that could remotely take place. But does it stick this close to the election in terms of scaring people, Fred?
Well, I think it's important for Canadians to understand what voting Liberal and NDP means. Right now, the Liberals are running record deficits, billions of overspending, and if they make a deal with the NDP to prop them up, it's going to be billions and billions and more, and there's not enough money in the Treasury. So the only way for them to afford this is to raise taxes, and that includes the GST, and if that's not the plan they're going to do, if they're not going to be raising taxes...
But that's your interpretation.
Well, the alternative is they're going to be cutting transfers to the provinces like they did in the 90s, which will have a huge impact on health and education. There's not enough money in the Treasury for...
Richard?
Well, I mean, first of all, Liberals
Richard,
have a cost...
That's nowhere in the platform, but your party is doing the same thing.
I don't think it's the same thing. I don't think it's an equivalency. I mean, election campaigns are going to be full of lots of claims about what the others are going to do. What Mr. Shearer has done is tell us where $55 billion of cuts have to be made. What we're saying, he hasn't exactly told us exactly how he's going to achieve those cuts. So on the gun control issue, he has promised, and has for some years promised, to relax some of our gun laws, while we're proposing to tough them up. I think what's happening here, though, on things like this mad GST claim that they've made, is obviously it's the last days. It's a very close election. Everybody's trying to get those last-minute people to change their votes. But really what Mr. Shearer is doing, and he's been doing it the whole campaign, he plays more to his base, a base that doesn't like Justin Trudeau very much, obviously, in order to motivate them to come out, as opposed to trying to appeal to that wider swath of Canadians who are trying to make their mind up and looking for a leader who brings people together. Mr. Shearer has run a campaign, and we'll see whether, on election night whether it works, where he constantly motivates the Conservative base rather than trying to say, how am I going to knit a country together and an economic plan together that's going to work for people. So we'll see how that goes, but I don't think it's going to work.
And one of the things that we've seen is the Liberals trying to scare people out of voting for the NDP, saying a vote for the NDP is in fact a vote for the Conservatives. The NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, has said that he won't support a Conservative government. Why do you think it is that the idea of a coalition is a dirty word or scary to people in Canada?
Well, first of all, I think that there's a lot of speculation and mythical thinking. I think truth is having a very bad moment right now. And I think that sometimes these things, I think, do appeal to the most committed partisans, whether there's any basis in fact at all, and maybe some other places in social media that they might resonate with people who maybe don't have all the information. But I do think that for the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, the key is not to get down in the mud on these things and to stay as relentlessly optimistic and hopeful as they have been during this entire campaign. And I think that's why the NDP is having a good moment right now.
And has Singh tied his hands by saying in the past that he wouldn't support the Conservatives? He kind of scoffed at the idea of the Conservatives on the campaign trail last week. Does that put him in a position where he's now lost his power if there's a Conservative minority?
He's sticking to his principles, you know. I mean, I don't think anybody ever thought that we would have much common ground with the Conservatives. Certainly, our voters are not looking for us to do anything significant with the Conservatives. And he has said that he's open to all sorts of other alternatives and working with other parties. But he has also been very clear that he is running to be Prime Minister. We're running to be a government, and whatever shape Parliament takes, whether it's a minority or any other kind of arrangements or a majority, we will work with other parties to get the things that we have identified as the urgent priorities that Canadians need in areas like pharmacare, housing, climate change.
Fred, if the Conservatives win, they don't seem to have a natural ally. You haven't had a party like in the other cases with the Liberals come forward and say they would consider allying and supporting with them. Do you think that that turns voters off choosing the Conservatives tomorrow?
Well, I think if you look at the history of this country, some of the most successful governments we've had were Conservative minority governments, and most recently the ones we just had. We don't have natural allies, it's true, and we have to work piece by piece each legislation with the other parties, and we've proven very capable of doing that, and that could work out very well for Canadians.
Richard, if the Liberals get in tomorrow, and a lot of people are speculating, could be a Conservative minority, could be a Liberal minority, no matter what, it looks like a minority. Let's say Justin Trudeau doesn't get that many seats. Now, he still is the Prime Minister by convention, which means he has the first chance to form government. Are the Liberals in conversations right now with the NDP or with the Greens to try to figure out a situation where they could get together and we could see a situation where there's NDP or Green cabinet ministers in a Liberal minority government? It becomes coalition.
I don't think so. I don't think those conversations are going on because I think all those parties, Conservatives, the Liberals, the Democrats, the Greens, are all working as hard as they can to get their vote out on Monday and to focus on those switchers. I will say this, though. I mean, I think you're right. It is a close election, so the chances of a minority are high. I thought it was a shrewd move, to go back to what Anne said, for Mr. Singh to say what he said, because what he's trying to convince people is there is no risk here. If you vote for me or if you vote for the Liberals, we have the same view on a lot of issues. We won't support the Conservatives. That means what he's trying to say to people is don't worry too much about this. And I think that was a shrewd move. What that has as an impact, I don't know. But no, there's no discussions going on. I don't think there will be. And we'll see what Canadians deliver up on Monday night. If they do a minority, then I think all the parties are going to have to figure what kind of, how they win the support and confidence of the House and able to govern. So we'll see what happens. But it does look, I think you're right, it looks like it's going to be a close one and quite possibly a minority government.
Let's talk about what happens to the different leaders tomorrow night when those results start to come in. Fred, does Andrew Shearer survive this if he doesn't manage to come out with at least a minority tomorrow?
Well, look, it's very rare to take down a one-term government. So for Mr. Shearer, if he can bring Trudeau down to a minority government even, I think that's a huge success for Mr. Shearer, and he should stay on. And I would encourage him to do so. And at the same time, though, I do think what I'm hearing from the campaign is that we're feeling very good and that the Conservatives should win the most seats tomorrow night.
And I think Mr. Singh probably has the perhaps most successful night of the leaders versus what he was expected to get at the beginning of the campaign and what he's getting at the end of the campaign. If his support, which has been rising, translates into votes, what does he need to do come Monday night to get the NDP a seat at the table and to establish himself as a leader?
Well, let's just look at the story of this campaign, Mercedes. I mean, we went into this campaign with the Liberals knocking on the edge of a majority government, with the Conservatives feeling very confident and aggressive in their ability to knock that off and replace them, with the Green Party showing signs of promise, real signs of promise, with the Bloc being sort of nowhere on anybody's radar, and with the NDP being perceived as dead in the water. And none of that is what has happened. The Liberals are not knocking on the edge of a majority. They're desperately trying to cling to the possibility, I think, of a minority government right now. The Conservatives look like they're looking for a minority government. The numbers for both those parties have come down significantly since the beginning of the campaign. The Bloc is having a resurgence. The Green Party looks like it has been fizzling out in many ways. And the NDP had a very good campaign and is looking like it's going to be playing a very significant role in whatever whatever happens as a result of the election on Monday night. So it's a very, very interesting story that this campaign has delivered for us. We'll see what the result is.
Richard, does Justin Trudeau survive if he doesn't come out of this with at least a minority tomorrow? It would be only the third time in Canadian history that a government that came in with a majority mandate was defeated after a first term, if that happens.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen. But of course, yes, I think he'll survive. I think Mr. Trudeau is a politician with a lot of gifts. He has been faced attack, and it's been a tough campaign for him. He's faced attack from all sides. You have people like Mr. Shearer this week saying he's going to form a majority government. I don't think that's going to happen. If I had to make a prediction, I do think it's much closer than maybe many people would like. But if I had to make a prediction, I would say this: I think the Liberals are going to win the most seats on Monday night. And I think Mr. Trudeau will then have to figure out whether it's a majority or minority, how he actually puts together a government. But no, I think Mr. Trudeau is a leader with lots of political gifts, and I suspect we'll see on Monday night and Tuesday what follows. But I suspect he'll be forming a government and implementing his agenda in the best way he can.
How does the resurgence of the Bloc change all of this when MPs come back to Parliament and they're really back on the radar for the first time in many, many years in federal politics?
It's a big change. I'll start on that one. I mean, I think that we were talking majority, minority. One of the reasons why a majority is going to be very difficult for any party, but is because of the resurgence of the Bloc in Quebec. Seems to me like they have almost got a mandate from people to say, whatever people think in Quebec about Bill 21, Quebecers are united. The rest of the country doesn't get to tell them how to roll with that thing. And so that is going to make for a divided parliament. It is going to make the next Prime Minister's job, Prime Minister Trudeau, I would hope, job a lot more difficult because he's going to be facing that. But I mean, I think the important thing for the rest of us to understand is that's not a mandate from Quebecers to push for separation. It's a mandate for Quebecers to be maître chez nous on issues of how they're going to build their society. So it'll be tough, but I mean, that's why we elect prime ministers. It's tough work, and they'll have to they'll have to do it.
Fred, any chance that the Conservatives will be able to get support from the Bloc?
Well, again, any Conservative government will be looking piece by piece with every legislation with all parties. There'll be certainly no deal or any type of formal cooperation with any of them, I'm sure, and particularly the Bloc. I mean, the last time the Bloc were ever in negotiations with political parties is when the Liberals and the NDP were willing to join a coalition with them. You won't be seeing that with
Mr. Harper had his moments of working with the Bloc Quebecois in a minority parliament that I recall.
Never signed a coalition
Mr. Martin
deal.
was Prime Minister, so...
never signed a coalition.
Well, Mercedes, the other thing that's interesting to note here is that whatever shape the Parliament takes, I think that aside from the Bloc, the only party that isn't looking like it's going to have some leadership issues is the NDP. I mean, I think Jagmeet Singh has solidified his leadership throughout this campaign, and I think that there are questions about the leadership of other parties, and so that has an impact on what kind of arrangements might be made following. You know, if one of either the Conservatives or the Liberals go into a leadership, either leadership crisis or leadership race, that has an impact on when they can go to the next election.
Okay, we have to wrap it up there. I'm sure we'll be keeping a close eye on this tomorrow night as we find out who will be the next government of Canada. Thank you so much to our Strats for joining us throughout the election.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. For the West Bloc, I'm Mercedes Stephenson.